right, looks like we are live.
We're ready to go.
Yep.
All right. Well, how about I get us started? You ready? What do you do when life hits harder than you ever expected? When the plans you built crumble and prayers seem unanswered, or even your faith seems shaky at best? Well, for so many of us over the last few years, life has left us running on empty spiritually. But what if that doesn't have to be the end of the story? What if resilience isn't just about surviving, but thriving in the middle of life's storms? Well, today we're diving into how to build a spiritual core that can withstand anything. And this is Resilient Faith, Strengthening Your Spiritual Core. I'm Ian Dunaway with Michael Schaefer at G6 Allies, and we have with a special guest, Zach Imboden, to unpack the habits, truths, and rhythms that keep your faith unshakable when everything else feels uncertain. So stay with us because you don't want to miss this workshop.
Thank you, Ian. Guys on the stream, welcome. So glad that you are here with us today, or if you're watching the replay of this later, which the majority of people probably are. I know a lot of times it can be challenging to get away from during a lunch break, or in fact, it's not even lunch break where Zach is yet, right? On the West Coast, it's still morning. Maybe we should brunch or something. I don't know, but so we are thrilled that you are with us for this conversation, and this is going to be a really good one because I know in the work that we do at G6 Allies, our goal is to carry the burdens of pastors and ministry leaders and their families. And so we have conversations every single week with pastors all over the country. And, the big buzzword right now, and has been for the last several years, is burnout, right? That we are exhausted. We have built a machine that we call church in America that is very brutal on the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual life of its leaders. And so it's no surprise then that we become really, really exhausted, right? But it doesn't have to be that way. And so we are committed to helping build resilient Christian leaders. That's our tagline at G6 Allies. And so that's why I think today's theme is spot on for our heart and what we want to do. And I couldn't think of anybody better to bring into this conversation than my friend Zach Imboden. Zach is the associate pastor at Lifehouse Church in Sacramento. And so, Zach, thank you, man, for being with us. And I know you do coaching as well as pastoring. So you're similar to what Ian and I do. We're both pastors and coaching other pastors as well. And so, man, tell us a little bit more about you. Give us the context about who Zach is.
Absolutely, man. And thank you guys for letting me come be a part of this, and looking forward to the conversation today. And it's an honor and a privilege to serve alongside of you guys in the ministry you guys are doing here at G6. And so thank you. My name's Zach. Been married to my wife, Ann, for almost 20 years now. And we have 2 kids. We adopted both of them here domestically from birth. So I have a 13-year-old daughter. Her name is Providence Joy. We call her PJ for short. And then I have a 10-year-old son, Justice Grant. And we are into the adolescent phase. So I feel like I need a parenting class called Resilient Parenting right now. That would be more helpful for me probably. So we're doing that. Been in full-time ministry for 20 years, all across the United States, here on the West Coast, Arizona, Mississippi. And we've been here at Lifehouse for almost 3 years now. It's been a joy, privilege. And I'm also, I do my own coaching. So a full life coaching, and I'm certified in a few things. Spiritual direction is one of those things as well. And so that's even kind of where the heart of this message comes from, based on my own experience and loving and caring and supporting other pastors along the journey as well. And so and in my own life, man, I've experienced significant burnout. And I think back to about 4 years ago, I moved into what I thought was like my ideal dream job. Super excited, everything that got there. Got on the job. 2 months into the job, I experienced my first panic attack, and then just constantly over the next like 3 months, weekly panic attacks. I just remember crawling underneath my office desk, just to escape the reality of the panic attack. And just scary moments, scary, not really sure what's going on. Got to a spot where just spiraled into some really significant deep depression. Checked myself into a little bit of a mental health retreat for a few days and did some coaching and caring. And part of that was in my own life. Like I realized the coaching or the testing they did with me, like I just burned all my adrenaline. I was such going in my job and in church for so long, and all amidst like my body just gave out. And so, so as we talk through some of this resilient things here today, Michael, man, I get it. I've been on both sides where I feel like I've thrived and done well, and I've been on the bottom where I've had to step out of ministry to take care of myself. So I think it's a helpful conversation as we walk through with other church leaders and our own experiences through it as well. And what about you, as you know, resilience is part of this G6 tagline. Where does it come from for you guys?
That's a good question.
It sounded really good.
Yeah.
Let's just do it.
That's the right thing to say.
But yeah, I think, I mean, one of the places that it comes from is just the deep sense of understanding the calling that this is the life that God has laid out for us.
Yeah.
And if because if it wasn't for that calling that I know is consistently there, man, I'd have quit ministry a long time ago, right?
Yes.
And I think most pastors would agree with that. Like, if it wasn't for the calling that God has placed on my life to do this, I wouldn't be doing it, because a lot of times it's not fun. But you know, so that would be probably the first answer. That may be kind of a Sunday school answer. It may not be what you're looking for.
It's a good answer though, man. It is. Like, you've been in ministry. If you're in ministry more than a minute, you've been tested.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I just hired a staff member yesterday. Yesterday was his first day on staff, and he's like, "What did I get myself into?" And you experience it, but there's this sense of that ministry is sacred, and but it also is costly as well. And so, how do we as leaders really develop this spiritual resilience to be in it for the long haul? And to be in it not just for the moment or for the season or for the upswing that it brings, or the adrenaline that it brings, and all the affirmation it does bring at times. But how do we in the hard times? How are we there to be with it, to follow through on the calling that God has for our life?
Yeah,
it's good. I often think of it. Resilience isn't a biblical word. Like, you can't look it up.
Right.
You can't do a word study on it. But it does. But it has the biblical roots in perseverance and endurance. And those are biblical characteristics that you can look up and read and talk about and discuss. I think of Hebrews 10:36 or James 1:12 or Romans 5:3 and 4. Resilience is this word, or perseverance or endurance is a significant word that we need to understand and know. And I think I just read my Bible and I just see these incredible Bible characters who had incredible resilience. The person that just jumps out to me is Joshua from the Old Testament.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a life that needed resilience. Even when he first starts off in Numbers 13 and 14, the 12 spies, they go out and 10 of them see obstacles that they can't overcome. But 2 do, Joshua and Caleb. And Joshua and Caleb come back and say, we should go. We should take the possession. The Lord is with us. Let's persevere. Let's move on. Not at the sense of like, we need to have grit and just push on at whatever cost. Yeah. But the sense of saying, God, that you are moving and you're inviting us to do these things, even when it's hard. Because so often we think of like there's word resilient, or grit was a word for a while. That was kind of a big word happening here. And that grit or worldly resistance would say, man, the ability to bounce back by willpower. And so if I have worldly resistance, man, I'm just going to bounce back. I'm going to get through it. I'm going to press on at whatever costs. But when I think about like biblical resilience or perseverance or endurance, that idea of pressing on by faith, because God is present in the good and the hard.
There is. Do you think
Go
that
ahead.
so much of it has to do with, like, one of the things that we struggle with? So we do a lot. I do a lot with student pastors. I work with all kinds of pastors.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I've noticed in the last, and we do it a lot in our cohorts, that we bring guys in and we spend a year or two or sometimes 3 just investing in them. But a lot of it, I think that there's a lot of issues with the fact that it's not just about the grit of getting there, but it's almost like we're fighting 2 different forces. We're almost fighting the difficulty and messiness and lack of affirmation ministry often brings, but then also a system in our culture that makes a lot of ministry more managerial and corporate than it does biblical and really from a shepherding point of view. And what's your take on how that kind of works in the, because we have a lot of guys that go, man, I'm just going to push through, and you just can't. That's part of what drew me to do what we're doing is so many guys falling out, because if you don't know why you're building endurance and why you're going through it, then it's a real struggle.
It is a real struggle. And I've been there, and I still go back to those seasons where I feel like, man, I just got to push harder a little bit more. And it's so easy to get in this season where it's our own personal, like you said, Ian, it's just like this personal thing we're working through. And it might be our own ego or our identity, whatever it might be, or, our bosses or supervisors or elders, whatever it might be, asking us we need to do more because we need to produce this many numbers of kids or students or group members or people in our church. And so I've had to really battle through in my own season, coming back from my own burnout, who've been in that season where I was gritting and I was having pushing through at whatever cost. And I've had just get to a spot where I just have to have open hands. And to go, all right, God, I know I want to work hard, and I don't mind working hard. Working hard I enjoy the working hard piece. I find great joy in working hard. But ultimately, I have to realize I have to make this mindset from being productive to wanting to be fruitful. Yeah. And when I'm productive, I'm trying to get people to do things at any cost. At my cost or somebody else's cost.
I had a pastor I served for who his favorite phrase was not, hey, I'm so excited we can see these people and I love these people. It was always, man, they look like they have a lot of horsepower. And I feel exactly what you're saying. It's people were just a means to an end, right? And not
I'll be honest, I've been there. I've used people.
Sure.
And in reality, I probably still do more than I even realized, but I'm trying to work on it. But if the goal is to be productive and produce, that means I'm deriving the results. But if I'm trying to be fruitful and faithful, man, I'm still going to work hard. I'm still going to do all the things, but I can't, I could plant the seeds. I can't make the tree grow. Where when I'm being productive, I'm trying to stretch that tree to grow a little faster, a little farther, a little bit more as I go. Right. And I can't do that. Even though I think I can, and I tried and I manipulate things to make it work. I have to get to a spot where my role really has to be faithful, in the conversation. And so that's what I'm learning. That's as I'm coaching other pastors and walking through and helping them work through those things. Are you being faithful in the things that God's called you to do, and not feel like you have to produce the things that God's called you to do? Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Can we dig into that one a little bit?
Absolutely.
A little bit deeper. And so imagine I'm a pastor, or maybe there's a pastor watching this, and he's kind of wrestling through finding that balance of how do I know when I'm being productive, doing what I should be doing, and when I'm doing too much.
Too much.
Because, when we talk about resiliency and burnout and rest and Sabbath and all of that kind of stuff, it's not super common because most pastors are the personality type that they tend to be workaholics, right? And so we're just going to work all the time. But I have encountered it where people use Sabbath, or they'll use rest or setting good boundaries as an excuse to be lazy.
Yeah.
And just, I'm not gonna do that part of my job right now because I need to take a break and I need to protect myself. And so how do we find that balance
Yeah.
Right. Again, that's the minority of pastors that we've encountered, but
Yeah.
that's certainly that's just kind of the pendulum swinging too far the other way. I think when most of us are over on this side.
Yeah.
Any suggestions on how we can identify where that proper balance is?
Yeah. So that start on for us, for those of us who might work too much. Let's talk about that piece, and then we'll swing back over to those who might be, maybe it's not you, but you have a staff member who might be a little bit more casual, maybe stuff like that. And so, so if you're like me, man, I love working. I love investing into God's kingdom. I love doing my job. I love all the things that I can do. And so, you might work too much. And how do you slow down enough to really kind of, to really start to have better boundaries and have better, be more healthy in those ways? And so I asked the questions. I would ask questions to you is, man, how is your time with God? Not for what you're producing, so if it's a sermon, if it's study times, whatever it is, like, are you doing time with God with just for your own sake? What's the quality of your time with God? And not just the quality, but the quantity, right? You just can't, I had one really good hour with God for a month and now I'm good. That's probably not quantity enough for you to really connect with God. And so what does that look like for you? So what's the quality and quantity of your time with God? Not for what you're doing for him,
Right.
but just to be with him.
I remember there was a study several years ago. I mean, it's been years. It said the average, this was just a mega church, or also, I guess, roughly 0.5% of churches, but the guys that oversee more people than anybody else. I think they did a survey, and the average amount of time in prayer per day was less than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty sobering statistic, where I don't think that changes based on the size of your church. In fact, most of the time your margin goes down the less people you have, because it's less people to help. But that is a crazy important thing. How often are we actually chasing after God as believers, not after God as pastors, right?
Yeah. One of my mentors would tell me, man, God created you to be a human being, to be with God, not a human doer.
Not a human doing. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great.
True. And, and so stuff, but if I'm honest, in the midst of, in my own seasons of the last 10 years of ministry, I mean, just picking up my Bible and just reading it is good, but it doesn't always fill my cup.
Sure.
If I'm just honest, like some of those spiritual disciplines that I've maybe used in my life 10, 15, 20, when I first came to know Christ, were helpful and beneficial then, but they probably don't fill my cup the way they used to. And so part of the question is, for me, when I talk to leaders or pastors, what new spiritual disciplines might you need to embrace to help re-engage your fuel with God, to help help re-engage some passion and connection with him? And so, things I think of, like praying the Psalms is a really helpful practice if you feel kind of stuck in your relationship with God. And what that means to me is, like, I just open the Psalms, and there's so many beautiful Psalms that David or others wrote there. And it's just taking it and just slowing down and actually maybe reading one verse and then praying in response to what that verse has to say. And so, like, for example, I'm going to just pull up my Bible here. Psalms, let's just pick one. Psalms 84. It says this: how lovely is your dwelling place, Lord Almighty. And so if I just stopped and paused and just reflected on that verse and go, what might be a word or phrase that stand out to me that I just might want to pray back to God? And so I might just say, how lovely is your dwelling place, Lord Almighty. God, you are almighty. That you are not like this wimpy God who just hanging out on the side, but you really are the almighty God who loves me and cares for me, who could build Yosemite and who could do all these incredible things, but you still want to dwell with me and be in my presence. Or verse 2 says, my soul yearns or even faints for the courts of the Lord. My heart and flesh cry out for the living God. Like, for me, I read that verse and as I slowly just think about it, Lord, that's not usually the way my heart works. I usually not, heart's not crying out or flesh crying out, but Lord, I just really want to say, help me. I confess that to you. And would you grow that in me? So, man, praying the Psalms is a simple, easy way to help you do that. And just slow down. It puts God in the center of the conversation and not you in the center of the conversation. Secondly, another easy practice, if you're moving and going quickly, man, sometimes I know this is hard, and especially our calendars are full, but try to show up to every meeting 5 minutes before the meeting starts. And because when you're rushing in from one thing to the next, like you don't even have a chance to even stop and pause and catch your breath and move in. But what if you move to the next meeting, and just before you start it, before everyone else walks in, just take a minute and just pray for the meeting. Lord, I pray for in this meeting with Michael. I pray for with Ian, Lord, as we gather together. Lord, would you lead? Lord, I want to invite you into this conversation. And just inviting God into the context of whatever you're happening with, a meeting or a coaching session or whatever it is, like just inviting God in those moments is a really helpful practice to slow down just a little bit to invite God. And that's a really easy one as well. And maybe a more challenging one, I'll leave you right now. It is. Michael said earlier, taking a day and you're practicing silence and solitude. It could be with your spouse, it could be with your family, or it could just be individually. And it could be, maybe to start off, I'm taking an hour or I'm taking a couple of hours to practice that. And maybe it develops into more of a Sabbath environment or a situation for you. But man, you want to learn to connect and help God to do things in your life. Times of silence and solitude with God are really meaningful and really significant. But I also know sometimes it's really scary. What if God does show up? What if God does point out things in my life that I really don't want him to point out on? Or what if God doesn't respond to me in love? He comes and I feel anger or disappointment, all those things that we struggle with sometimes that we're not even aware of. Silent solitude will pull those out, and God often connects with us in really meaningful, significant ways in some of those areas. So there's a couple ideas to help you think about, if you're busy, how to slow down and build some practices to help you connect with God.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I want to let's push in a little more to the silence and solitude one.
Yeah.
That is a practice that I don't know that too many of us engage in regularly, and maybe don't fully understand. I've talked to a couple pastors about that discipline of silence and solitude, and I think there's a misunderstanding that just by the name of it, that it just means lowering your word count, right? And that's not what silence and solitude is. It doesn't mean you sit there and you just scroll through TikTok and don't say anything and you're being silent and you're alone. Like that.
Yeah.
That's not silence and solitude, right?
Yeah.
So help us a little more understanding what the practice of silence and solitude looks like.
Yeah. Man, just look through scripture and you see God interacting with people in really meaningful, significant ways. And it's usually when they're not busy doing something. Probably the only one I can really think of is Paul, when he's out on out and God comes and blinds them. But Paul's out on a mission, going out to do something. But so many times people are just doing small, simple things, and God shows up in a really meaningful part in their life. So the way like silent solitude kind of works, or when I coach people or kind of guide them through maybe an hour or 2 hours with God, is I just start off by just pick some scripture out, pick a psalm, pick an interaction with Jesus that he has with somebody, and read it 2 or 3 times, and just to slowly start, just to slow down the motor that we all have that's going so fast. And so, but pick something that just allows you to slow down and just to enjoy being with God and stuff like that. And then I might look at it and go, okay, I'm going to take this psalm or this interaction with Jesus and just take a question or take a thought that might come out of it, and just maybe get up and walk. Go for it. You don't feel like you got to sit still somewhere. Something just moving is a helpful exercise. Go for a walk. And if it's that psalm we just read, God, help my soul cry out for you. I might just think and evaluate, Lord, where am I falling short in that? Where might be sin in my life that I might need to do? Or Lord, is there something you might want to say to me? So I might want to journal that. I might want to go walk and just talk with God. I might do that for 10, 15 minutes, and just The idea is just, again, you're slowing down the motor,
Yeah.
slowing down the productivity piece of your life where you are excelling and you are in control of everything else that's around you. And you're allowing God to slow you down so he could be in control of the conversation and not you in control. And then I might just ask God some questions about my life, about what my relationship with him. And I just might more move from a posture of talking to God, saying, God, what do you want to tell me? And that God actually might want to speak to me, that God actually might want to talk to me about my own life, about me, about our relationship, maybe some family things or some friend things. But I try to really focus on helping God engage in a relationship with me. And what does God might want to say to me? And so learning just to slow down enough. So journaling, I might have some questions that I might use as a prompt to help me think about my relationship with God or assess where I'm at. But I'm moving from a place of just being in charge, letting God be in charge, what that might look like for me.
That's good. Well, before we move on, let me just talk to the live viewers for a second.
Yeah.
We've got 6 or 8 people on here live, and just want to encourage you, drop a question in the chat. I know a lot of what we're talking about now does require a bigger degree of vulnerability, probably to say, hey, you know what, I don't do a good job of praying regularly. I don't spend time in the Word like I should. And you don't want to post that publicly on a forum, right? Whatever. I get that. I would encourage you to be vulnerable and do that, because that's what this space is for.
Just ask about your friend.
Yeah.
Yes, right. I have a friend that doesn't read his Bible, but just put something in the comments, ask questions, like practical steps on how to do some of what we're talking about. Or many of you are probably, almost every single one of you watching is friends with one of the 3 of us who are on screen now. Send us a direct message too if you don't want that being. Russ says my friend Ian.
Thanks, Russ from North
Hey,
Carolina.
Russ, I want to be friends, man. Come on, let's go. Drop Ian, pick me up.
But yeah, so send us a message. We'll keep it anonymous, but we want to help. We want these workshops to not just be a couple of talking heads, but to be something practical and helpful that serves you in your ministry context where you are. So be sure and drop that into the chat on whatever streaming service you're watching this on. So all right, Zach, let's happy
birthday, John Ross.
Happy birthday, John. There you go. 36.
Hey, John. 36. Happy birthday, sir.
Zach, let me ask you this question, because we did a podcast on this with John Oliver, who's with us as well and been commenting. John and I did a podcast because one of the things we hear, and I think it's being specific and having the right terms and the right definitions, I think is so key. Like when we're talking about, because burnout, like Michael said, burnout has become a very in vogue statement. And I'll work with student pastors or leaders or pastors all over, and they'll say, man, a lot of times this comes from student pastors right now because they're younger, and they'll go, man, I'm really just burnt out. And I'll say, well, how long you been doing ministry? About 2 years. And I'll go, well, hold on. I think, and we kind of talked about a lot of this, that I think you are discouraged, which heavily mimics a lot of the feelings of burnout. I think that discouragement over time leads to burnout. But what do we need to understand about the realities? Because we're talking about how do we keep from that. I think it's also important to understand, how do you just start living in a way that helps you get away from discouragement, away from the steps that would lead you towards burnout, and what it really marks what burnout is.
Yeah, man. So let me highlight in my own journey. And I think I think back about 5 years ago, I had lunch with one of my a leader. He's like, man, I'm really burned out. I just need a weekend away. And he did. He was running hard for a season, and so we gave him a weekend off. We just let him go, take his family getaway for a few days, and he came back on Monday and was like, all right, I'm good. And so there's that kind of burnout. And then we use the same word for all these kind of different versions of burnout, which isn't always the most helpful sometimes.
It's kind of like when you talk with a counselor about depression, and they'll be like, well, you can feel depressed without being depressed, and there's seasonal. So it makes sense. There's got to be varying levels of it.
It totally does.
Yeah.
And so there's that burnout. And then there's like the burnout that I experienced, which was like, hey, I needed 6 months off.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I needed to regroup and recalibrate. And then I have other friends, man, it took them 3 or 4 years to really recover from the burnout that they experienced as well. And so part of understanding the burnout question is understanding what's the reality you're really experiencing, what's the need you really, and for most of us, we're not at a spot where I need 6 months off. I need, a weekend away, a break, or kind of reprioritizing some times is really, really helpful. And so for most of us, we live in that stage of burnout of where you just feel exhausted, and you went from a season that's been busy and you just feel worn out. And so, you may not be moving as much, you're maybe eating not as healthy, your sleep is not as good as it should be. Your stress levels are higher for a longer period of time than normal. And so, man, things like taking a nap or scheduling a few days off or spending time with loved ones are just good for the soul there as well. But when you're worn out, moves to start being like burnout or worn out, burnout, like then things like your values start to change, your coping mechanisms start to change. You are feeling more bitter inside. Like it's just not a physical worn out. It actually starts to affect your emotional well-being. And those, when you get to those places, or you start to recognize some of those things, I mean, that's where you need other people to step in and help you. And there's a difference between worn out and burnout. And then I would say the next one is like maxed out. Like you're just done. You can't function anymore. And so just helping people recognize maybe what stage of burnout you might be in. Are you worn out? Are you just burned out? Or are you maxed out? Those are different words to help us think through the burnout conversation that are might be more helpful sometimes. Because we say burnout, I just need a day off or a few days off and recover and be good. Compared to actually, I might need some more serious help on the backside of that. And so the more you can maybe recognize or catch what season of burnout you're in is really, really helpful.
That makes sense. They both kind of build on each other and lead to each other eventually. If we don't,
Totally
it's almost
do.
like if you're burned out and you go, I just need a weekend. The problem is that, like one of my friends always says, it's a great way. He said, if it takes a long time to get broken, and it takes time to get fixed. And so I think it does make sense. A lot of us are trying to put Band-Aids on bullet holes, or we're using the wrong terminology to explain where we're at. So that makes a lot of sense.
And so, so when you have friends or, people who are walking through burnout stuff, what's helpful for them? Hey, if I gave you a weekend away, or if you need a few days off, or you just need some time with loved one, maybe your calendar's out of whack for a season, that it happens. My calendar gets out of whack, just because of life and ministry, and that's okay. But if a season turns into a year or seasons of like that, then I need somebody to step in and help me reprioritize some things in my life. But when seasons turn into seasons or long years, in a sense, maybe that's when burnout starts to happen, and it moves from just a physical state. Now it really does start affecting your emotional and mental state of what you can offer and what you can do. And so having friends, having companions that you can walk through, having counselors or spiritual directors step into your life into those seasons are really, really helpful. I know that you and G6, you guys have some of those things that in place that you're working on, and reach out there. We love to help you connect. But if you're working through some burnout, where it's worn out, burned out, or maxed out, man, you need help, and you need help that's individualized to what stage of burnout you're really in.
Yeah, it's good word.
It's good. All right. So what else? Let's keep talking about the title of our workshop today is Resilient Faith, Strengthening Your Spiritual Core. So we've talked about some of the practical things that you can do, like
Mhm.
praying the Psalms, silence and solitude,
Yeah.
identifying what stage of burnout that you're in. What are some other steps toward resiliency that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's helpful, and we all experience this in our life and our spiritual faith, where if you're a pastor or just and you're walking with Jesus, sometimes the resilience is to recognize what you're hitting against,
Mm.
and it's usually not somebody.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is, but that's usually not the cause. I mean, we all have relational conflicts at times, but common walls that we all experience in Christian leadership. And so when you recognize maybe what wall you're hitting that you need to work through, or that God needs to help come into your life and work out, is a helpful, maybe some language to understand what you need resilience for, rather than I feel stuck, or I feel broken, or I feel I can't get through. And so when we've already talked about burnout, but burnout it's one of those walls that we do hit in our lives and in our leadership. Sometimes it's spiritual fatigue, and you just made a loss of joy. You're running on empty. That causes for you to hit that wall in your life. You just maybe aren't investing enough spiritual time into your life. Maybe third, maybe there's a blowout. It might be a moral or emotional collapse in your life that you maybe nobody else knows about, or maybe somebody knows about, but there's not real repentance, or kind of God's doing stuff in there. And so there's a moral blowout. And unfortunately, man, we see this so much, and it's like there's more every day. There's always somebody coming out with a moral blowout that we're having to deal with. That, but it's a reality. But that doesn't just happen in the moment. It's been a time to get there. It could be personal crisis. It could be a loss. It could be grief. It could be your some health or cancer, or to you or somebody else, or there might be some conflict happening in your life that cause you to hit this wall, and that is a struggle to work through. But sometimes it's just a faith crisis. Not mean to say I'm denying Christ, or I'm wrestling through my faith, but it could be a faith crisis, or even just a dark night of the soul where you're struggling and doubting, and you're deconstructing your faith, maybe, or just this spiritual dryness that you're experiencing. Man, so many leaders have to walk through those moments of just dark nights of the soul. Those are walls that you need to have resilience for. And so again, I think the 5 common walls that Christian leaders experience: burnout, spiritual fatigue, blowout, personal crisis, faith crisis, or dark nights. And to be honest, you will experience, man, all those may probably, but you'll experience those walls often in your spiritual life. You don't hit it once and they'll never come back. They're
Right.
spiritual walls that we all experience in Christian leadership, or just following Jesus, that we have to either then figure out, okay, God, how are you going to show up in my life? And how do you want to lead me and guide me through these moments, and stuff as that? And so, man, I think of I share a little bit of my own blowout or my burnout. Think of personal crisis. I mean, I think of like my brother who passed away from cancer a couple of years ago, and just having to walk through that. Like, that just creates spiritual walls that God has to work through my own life in. I mentioned we adopted our kids, and so we went through the adoption process. Like, talk about personal crisis, the things that we had to interact with and go through. Man, like I think we had friends who were able to like take us to Jesus when we couldn't get there ourselves. Think of times where I've been spiritually fatigued or just exhausted and running on empty. Like, those are walls we hit, and we have to let God do things in our lives to help us work through those walls, and not just keep hitting them over and over and over and over and over again. And so to help develop resilience, sometimes it's helping to just identify what wall are you hitting, and what wall is in your life for this season, and then asking God, what do we do about that? And so when you identify, it at least gives you some language to use to help identify with other friends to help you through the process.
Yeah, I think identifying that wall, that thing that is the primary source of your fatigue, And just being able to name what that is a huge step toward finding a solution for it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you think about how different your life would be if that one thing wasn't the vacuum on your soul.
Right.
So now my priority is how do I remove that thing, right?
Yeah.
And so if I can remove that thing, that's the equivalent of putting my own oxygen mask on first, and then helping others, right? So that's good. I like that.
If I'm honest, like in my natural human state, my walls aren't my problems; they're your problems. Well, Michael did this to me. It's my boss. It's this person. It's my wife. It's my kids. It's like it's so easy for me to blame other people. So my wall is somebody. It's usually not my problem.
Yeah. And that's human nature, right?
It
Like
is,
we love to play the blame game.
Yeah.
In our church, we're going through a series looking at like a character study throughout the Old Testament, 30,000-foot view kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And that's something you see recurring from Adam and Eve to, Adam, why did you do this? Oh, well, it's the woman that you gave to me. And then she's like, no, it was the serpent. And then Abraham's like, no, it's my wife, Sarah. Or, it just keeps on going. And even up to King Saul, that's who we talked about this past week. When Saul offered the sacrifice himself instead of waiting for Samuel, Saul said, well, Samuel, you didn't show up when you were supposed to. And it was actually my troops who disobeyed God. Like, it's a recurring theme throughout the Bible. And if we're not careful, we tend to look at those passages as, come on, guys, how dare you? What are you doing? Without realizing we do the exact same thing, right? Yeah. My problems are actually someone else's problems. Very good.
And triaging those walls, it's a crazy thing because sometimes I feel like maybe it's helpful to know what those walls are, but I think it's interesting. Like in the book of James, one of my favorite passages is in the very beginning when he starts talking about how, you've got a split soul, and, he creates that word diasukos, and it's the only time we see it in Greek. And, but that splitting is, when you look at the Old Testament, anything that's split is sinful, right? And there's almost this, you said walls, but every time I've taught that passage, it's always been that often God sits there ready to give wisdom and ready to help us, rather than, and he's ready for us to ask about it, because we often build walls around us. And it's like, God's almost saying, hey, until you deal with this, I'm not moving you further. And it's not going to help you to try and move you down. And so I think, sometimes those walls can be something you didn't cause. Sometimes they can be part of what you're doing. A lot of times I just think that they're our own sin and problems that we don't want to deal with. And
absolutely,
it's a great way to think about it, Zach.
But we so often, if I'm honest, man, for me, like I hit the wall. Yeah. So what am I going to do? I'm going to try hard. I'm going to take one more step back and run a little harder into the wall. I'm like, that didn't work. I'm going to take another step back and run a little harder into the wall. And I'm going to push through and I'm going to get through this wall. And like I would never literally do that in my life. But so often when I think about my own spiritual fatigue, but my own sin issues, my own personal crisis in my own life, or my issues, like, man, if I just back up a little bit farther and run a little bit harder, isn't that grit? I'm going to bounce back and I'm going to try a little harder. I'm going to bounce back and try a little harder. And I don't think that's what God's called us to do. And so we want to build.
Some will define that as grit. Yeah. Einstein will define that as insanity, I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
And but that's not what resilience is. Excuse me. That's not what resilience is. It's saying, God, I'm at this wall. Help me. Yeah. Help me bounce back from this wall, and help me to really discover more of who you are and more of who I am, and how do I live this life on the other side of the wall. And and to let God really come in and help deconstruct that wall for you, so you can enter into a season that he really wants you to have. And the walls aren't always bad. They're usually dumb decisions we've made, but man, those wall moments are really good spiritual formation pieces of our life. But I do recognize, man, that we hit that wall. I've talked to a few leaders, and they hit this wall and they just go like, man, my relationship with God is cold, it's distant, it's this wall. So they just walk back. and they just say, they just give up, and they just let their relationship with God be more based upon duty, what they do for God, more than real intimacy, because they feel like they've hit this wall and they can't conquer it. They can't bust their way through it. And so they get stuck in their relationship with God, and they usually end up being hurt and frustrated and disappointed and callous in their relationship with God, because they can't let God come in and really help them deal with the walls of their life.
What would you say to the ministry leader who is at that wall? They got nothing left in the tank. They're done. They're phoning it in. They're doing like kind of what you're just describing. They're going through the motions to keep their job and to get a paycheck, but there's no depth to ministry for them at all.
Yeah.
But they have been doing ministry for 10, 15, 20, 50 years, and they don't have anything else to do. They don't have any other skill set. They're not marketable in the job place. They got to keep an income. So I'm just going to live burned out and just keep doing this
going.
because I can't go do anything else.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to that pastor who's listening?
Yeah. It's okay. I just say it's okay. And there's no shame. There's no Jesus isn't looking down at you, wagging his finger, going like, "Come on, man, let's try a little harder." Like, get your act together, figure it out, read your Bible. Like, Jesus isn't up there going like with frustration or disappointment or anger towards you. Jesus is looking down and going like, "I love you and I care about you." And so if you feel like it's even you've been preaching for the last X amount of time, but it just feels like a task you're doing, and it's not coming from the soul or from real places in your own heart, man, maybe the best place is just to reach out to somebody that's safe. That might not, it's me, Michael, Ian here. Just have a conversation.
Yeah.
And just have a conversation and see what God might do. And sometimes we get that fear, like, man, what if I reach out, they're going to tell me to quit my job? I'm not going to say that to you. I'm not God. I'm not gonna go, or whatever it might be, or there's fear of what they might think, or it invalidates the last X amount of time of my ministry. And this might be the moment where God might want to do something that redeems all those years of ministry.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to live this way. You don't have to do ministry this way. Your relationship with God doesn't have to look this way, but you might just need some help. And having help is one of the best things you can often do for yourself and for the people that your family and the people that you lead. And so don't have the fear of what if, or how about this, but man, to really invite somebody in your life who can help listen and hear and discern God's voice in your life in a really meaningful, significant way that might bring life to you, and maybe bring life to the people you're serving even right now. And so it doesn't have to be the end of the road. It could be the beginning of a really good, fun new road where life is happening. So
it is so much of that corporate mindset that we talked about in the very beginning, I think does play into it. And it's not a very biblical one, right? Like, God uses periods of reset despite how long you've been doing. Like, you look at David, is poised to be king, anointed. Then he goes to the wilderness for 10 years. Then he comes back. And then with Bathsheba, that's a year-long issue with his own sin and dealing with that. Then he loses his kingdom for a time. But there's never a moment in, one of the guys we like to talk about so much for his faithfulness, that God doesn't say, yeah, we're going to reset you. You need to learn a new lesson. And I think that we're afraid of that, because I think we're afraid of the CEO corporate, man, what if my career goes south where I didn't want it to go? And I don't think God looks at it that way. I think that he looks at resetting people. Sometimes it's a hard boot. Sometimes it's a little bit less, but that's a good word to say, lean into it. Because if you don't, the best you've got is your power until it just runs out.
Yeah. I often will think what got you to the wall won't help you get through the wall. And so you need to figure out where it's some new spiritual practices, some new relationships into your life that are going to help you get through that wall. And so what got you to the wall won't help you get through the wall. And so it's new people, it's new practices, are going to be the things that actually help you get through that wall.
I think there too is one of the things that I think will help so many ministry leaders is everything you have said, new spiritual practices, renewing your own soul and keeping a priority on that. But I also think there, and I want to get your thoughts on this. There also is the challenge of the work environment that we have created, the systems that we have placed around a pastor and what the pastor does that Eugene Peterson speaks to so clearly. His book, Working the Angles, is one of my all-time favorite books. One I think every pastor should read. And it's not about burnout, but it does address a lot of this that we have. He opens it by saying that pastors have abandoned their calling. They're still getting paychecks from the church. It's still their name on the placard, but they're not focused on what being a pastor actually is. They're being religious CEOs, and they're doing all of these different things when they need to have three different core components that make up their primary work. And I feel like we could avoid a lot of the burnout conversations that we have and those situations that we help other pastors navigate if we would shift from being the church administrator and janitor and event planner and all of the different things to the pastor's job is to pray for the congregation, to study the word of God, and to give spiritual direction to the congregants. That's it. Yeah. If we could shift to that kind of a focus, I think a lot of this burnout stuff might solve itself. What do you think?
Yeah. And so part of it's helping us understand our calling, and so Eugene Peterson lived in his calling so well to what that means to be a shepherd for his people, to pray, to read, to offer spiritual direction for his people. And it's a beautiful picture of a pastor that Jesus modeled to us so well when you read the Gospels as Jesus as the pastor. And so, and so part of us is helping us to move from this place of how much do we do for God to actually be with him. And when we're with him initially, and when we spend time with God, and we're connected to him, those things are going to help me. They're going to help you. They're going to help how we do. They should affect everything we do. And so, what I love about Eugene Peterson is that he doesn't have these two doors. That this is what I do spiritually in my own private time, and this is what I do in leadership.
Right.
Like there's not. We think that way. Here's what I do with my relationship with God, and here's what I do for him. But it's actually for Eugene Peterson, he would argue that's the same door or the same thing he does. So what I do in my spiritual time affects what I do. And so that's what I love about, when you can merge those two worlds together. We don't have two separate worlds of what I do and who I am. Really do play a part. And so I'd ask the questions, if I dig a little deeper into Eugene Peterson stuff, how often do you pray for your congregation? How often do you pray for your staff members? How often do you pray for the people you're leading in a spiritual way? If you're a church of 100 people, it might be a lot easier. If you're a church of 1,000 people, that's a little bit more of a challenge. And you have to think through, what do you do? What does that rhythm look like for you and for, to be praying? Or the spiritual direction, like who does get your best? Not everybody in the life of your church can get your best, and that's okay. I think in my own job, I think I could give 15 to 20 people my best every, in a season. Yeah. And so I identify who are the 15 to 20 people over the next 3 months that need to get my best time and energy.
Yeah.
And that's what I give it. Doesn't mean I don't help this person or support that person or pick a phone up, but who gets my best for this season of life? Who can offer spiritual direction, spiritual leadership, spiritual investment into their lives? I can't do that for everybody. And so I got to identify how many people I can give that to for a season. And then what does that look like? Is a really helpful way when I think about how I live some of those things out of practicing spiritual direction and leadership for people. Who gets my best? And am I okay with that number being only a 10 to 15, 20 people based upon my role and capacity that I have for a season? Is a way to think about that a little bit too.
That's good. I like that. Well, so we've got a few minutes left. If you got questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. But I want to give Zach a few minutes before we wrap up to get to anything that you wanted to discuss, or maybe we haven't got to, because I know I sidetracked several different times here.
This is
but
good.
What else you want to share with us before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'll wrap it up this way. To build spiritual resilience, man, there's not a one path. Follow these 4 steps and you'll get there. It doesn't work that way, and it'd be a lot easier if it did. But I would just encourage you, that I think through our conversation we've had today and the pieces here, this is how I would summarize to help you think about what this might look like for you. How do you build spiritual resilience? I'd ask the question, man, what spiritual rhythms is God inviting you into right now? Maybe some new ones, or maybe some ones you need to come back to, maybe ones you read in college that you haven't practiced at all in the last 15, 20 years, whatever it might be. But since to develop spiritual resilience, you have to abide in Jesus. What are those spiritual rhythms that God might be inviting you to step out into? Not for what you can produce for God, but for you to really connect with him.
Yeah.
The second question I'd ask is this: who are the people do you need to walk with you in this season? And you need, if you need to abide with Jesus, man, you need to ask for help. You can't do this alone. You can't build resilience by yourself. And so who are the people who know the unfiltered version of you? Do you have safe places where you can honestly talk and share into your life? Man, you need guides, people who have been there, who can walk with you in these seasons. You need people in your life who can walk with you in life right now. But who are the people do you need in your season of life right now? And Michael, this is the last one. We talked about Eugene Peterson a little bit too, but what are the priorities do you need to realign in your life right now? What are those priorities that you need to realign? And and so is it things at home? Is it things in your personal life? Is it things in the job that you are doing that you shouldn't be doing, that you need to let go of and have some conversations about? But what do you need to reprioritize so you could be in it for the long haul? And so what new rhythms do you need to develop? What new relationships do you need to develop? And then what do you need to realign in your life? If you want to develop spiritual resilience, to be in it for the long haul, those are 3 questions that you might need somebody to come alongside of you and help you process and help you develop a plan that is geared towards you. Because when we all hit those walls, what got you to the wall won't help you get past the wall.
Well, Zach, thank you for taking the last hour with us to talk through this. One of the things that we think everybody's watching this that knows how to get in touch with us, but not everybody knows how to get in touch with you that's going to watch this. And so we'd love to give you that moment to share. How do you want people to contact you? Do you have a secret private cell phone number that only those people can call? Email? How do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my website is fulllifeforyou.com. And you could reach out that way. There's contact form. There's my calendar is on there. If you want to schedule a time to talk, and man, if you want help processing your relationship with God, helping you prioritize, realign your life and some of those things, I would love to have a conversation. So fulllifeforyou.com is how you do that. And Michael just put it in the notes there. So love to connect with you.
Right. Well, Zach, thank you so much. It's been a really good hour. Listen, whether you're watching this live or you're watching it, I guess not live, pre-recorded, and you're watching it later on when it's posted, that doesn't need to stop you from putting questions and comments, because listen, we still see it. We get notifications and we will contact you. But thank you, Zach and Michael, for just taking the time to be able to talk through something that we talk about it a lot, and it has a lot of over exaggeration or under exaggeration, because it is such a prevalent issue. Right. And so thank you for helping to clarify what burnout is and helping us understand life long rhythms and actual habits that we can do, not only to get out of burnout, but also to help keep from it. Cause that's really the goal, right? If we can do our best to set a foundation so we don't have to experience it, we can help others. So if this was encouraging to you, let us know in the comments. If you got questions, let us know in the comments. If you think there's somebody that needs to hear this, you may not want to tag them in it because that could be awkward, but you might send them the link and let them know, and make sure to share what we're doing, because it would absolutely be a blessing to us, to be a blessing to them. So listen, we love y'all. We're praying for you. We're excited. Zach, thank you. And we'll catch you next time.